The gospel lesson for this morning is from St. Luke's Gospel, the 13th chapter, beginning at the 31st verse. This is the story of Jesus drawing near to Jerusalem. At that very hour, some Pharisees came to Jesus and said, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." He said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me, listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and yet you were not willing. See, your house is left to you, and I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, 'Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord.'" Here ends the reading from Luke. Well, I wrote this sermon in the car. And usually when I go on vacation, I take some kind of tape or CD with me to better educate myself in some way. But this time, I just took a bunch of comedy tapes, comedy CDs. And but as I was thinking about this sermon this whole week while I was gone, and starting to realize the threat of snow keeping me away, possibly, my sister didn't want me to come back, so it was a very sad scene, me dragging her across the parking lot, the driveway rather, getting to my car, but I said, no, I have to go, so at any rate. So Psalm 27 became more important to me, the hosts against me, meaning the storms and all that sort of stuff. So I decided I was going to use the psalm that Neil read for the text this morning. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Yes. So I've got a test for you this morning. You can write this down in your little notebook, which you all keep when you have amazing ideas. I know you have a little notebook. Does anybody have a little notebook? Anyway, you should always have a little notebook with you. I told my brother-in-law once, I said, you buy these little notebooks, who is it? Hemingway always wrote his ideas for stories in these notebooks. And then when you get a good idea, when you get a really good idea or a new thought, you write this down. And he said, I never have any ideas or new thoughts, so you can buy one. At any rate, here's the survey. Does God hear you when you pray? Yes or no? You don't have to answer out loud. It's okay. Just, mark it down in front of you here. God is love. Yes or no? Earl is trying to influence the audience here. Now, here's a multiple choice. God answers prayer. A, not sure. B, not always in the way I had hoped. C, if so, why is the world in such a mess? D, in the long run, I believe God works good in my life and in the world. And now to the statement, the Lord is my light and my salvation. A, always. B, mostly. C, I'm still struggling. Probably the most honest assessment for me, and I think for many of you, is that we still struggle with these ideas about our trust and our reliance on God. There is so much in our life that asks for our allegiance and for our loyalty, and there's so much in our life that promises security apart from God. And quite frankly, I know many of you, and myself included too, have prayed for certain things to happen in our life that didn't happen. And they were important things, and we can't quite understand why life went the way it did. There's always somebody around, some pious person around who says, well, when you get to heaven, God will explain all this to you. I'm not sure that's a very good answer this side of heaven. It's never been sufficient for me. But the psalm writer, the man who wrote Psalm 27, had a lot of confidence in God, it seems. But also, this is a person who is very much akin to us. In the face of serious threats, the psalm writer says, "Whom shall I fear?" When I read that again this morning, I was thinking about the folks in Hawaii under the tsunami watch, you know. They didn't realize what was going to hit them. As it turns out, it wasn't anything too serious, but it could have been terrible. And of course, when we see a threat in the future, if you're anything like me, I recall all the stuff in the past, like the last tsunami that killed well over 100,000 people, see. So then, in our infinite wisdom as human beings, we write the script for the future, don't we? And we write in all those terrible things. Oh, the tsunami's going to be awful. There's going to be loss of life, property damage, all these other terrible things. And so some people in Hawaii would say, God answered our prayers. I wonder if they talked to the people in Haiti. It's not always that simple. Our confidence gets broken up and eroded sometimes by things in life that are terrible and strong. The truth is, however, that you wouldn't bother to pray, and I wouldn't bother to pray, if there wasn't something in us that says we have to trust God. Because trust and need are interwoven. It's like when a child comes up to a parent and says, "Mama, will you please do this for me? Daddy, will you please take care of this for me?" The reason they ask it is because they trust us. They know they may get a no answer, but they ask us because they trust us. And quite often when you have unburdened your heart and talked to someone about some terrible things that are going on in your life and places where you really need help, and maybe your loss of confidence in God, the reason you talk to that person is because you have some trust in that person. There's some way you believe that that trust in that person is going to be valuable to you at this very moment. And so trust and need are interwoven. We can't express it unless we have some trust. And note the trust and need interwoven in the stories about Jesus. So often when Jesus does a healing in the midst of our New Testament, we've heard him say to the person, "Your faith has made you well. Your faith has made you well." Unfortunately, that gets twisted around quite often, see. So if I pray for healing and I don't get healed, some people will say, "Well, your faith wasn't strong enough." That isn't what that's about. That wasn't what that's about. What that person experienced in that moment was that that person's faith in God was exercised in the life of Jesus, and that person was healed. And so if you, in fact, are praying for healing or praying for something else in your life, and you use that verse in the opposite way, "If I only had enough faith, God would answer me," that's bad theology. And anybody who tells you, well, the reason you didn't get that, or the reason you didn't get healed, or the reason whatever, is because your faith wasn't strong enough. Your faith cannot be measured by anyone else. That is you and God together. How God speaks to you, how you speak to God, and no one else can make a decision on how strong your faith is. And the psalmist says, "Of whom shall I be afraid?" Now, I could make a list right now, and I'm sure you could too. But the great thing about Psalm 27 is we don't have any historical context. We don't know why the psalmist wrote this psalm. We don't know what was coming upon him. We don't know what he was afraid of. We don't know what threats were there. But he's one of us. Of whom shall I be afraid? And this is also a psalm of openness. The words fit you and me today as though they were written this morning. And we share the common challenges with this writer. This writer who is so many centuries old is one of us. And there are 3 petitions in this psalm. They come in verse 7. "Hear me, O God.